Hey everyone, welcome back to Not a Movie Buff, the show where we talk about movies, stories, and all the weird ways they connect us without needing a film degree to join the conversation. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm glad you're here. And if you've been rocking with me since the start, you already know what it is. Last time, we talked about what makes a bad movie actually good, how even the most flawed films can teach us something about storytelling and effort. Today's episode, we're flipping that same idea on its head. Because sometimes when the studios stop listening, the fans start creating. If you've ever watched a movie or a show and thought, if they'd just done this one thing differently, it could have been great, then you already get it. That's how fan creators are born. It always starts the same way, not with money, not with a plan, but with that one stubborn idea that just won't leave you alone. The credits roll. Everyone else moves on, but you're still sitting there thinking, what if? What if that character lived? What if somebody just cared enough to do it right? That's the moment where a fan becomes a storyteller. Not because they think they can do it better, but because they love it too much to let it die. That's what I mean when I say fan creations are love with homework. It's not just admiration, it's action. It's people grabbing a camera, opening up animation software, writing scripts, recording voice lines, and saying, fine, if they won't make it, I will. And it's beautiful when you think about it, because we live in a time where anyone with passion and patience can create something that looks and feels professional. Fans don't just write or draw anymore. They produce, animate, edit, compose. They're not just watching the story anymore. They're continuing it. That's what this episode is about. That unstoppable kind of love that turns ordinary fans into filmmakers, animators, and storytellers. And the thing is, it's not new. Fans have been doing this for decades, drawing their own sequels, writing their own novels, recording tapes, building costumes. The only difference now is that technology finally caught up with imagination. 20 years ago, you could only dream about making something that looked cinematic. Now, you can shoot it on your phone, edit it on your laptop, post it online, and reach millions overnight. That's power. And it's changed how storytelling works forever. But what's crazy is how good some of these stories are. We're not talking about rough sketches or shaky cam footage anymore. These are full-blown productions, scored, voiced, color graded, sometimes with visual effects that rival what a major studio does. And all of it's done by people who aren't getting paid a cent. They're doing it because the story means something to them. That's the part that blows people's mind, the effort to reward ratio. Most people won't even start a project unless they're guaranteed recognition. Fan creators know they most likely won't get any recognition, but they do it anyway. Because for them, it's not about clout. It's about keeping the story alive. And honestly, that's what makes this topic so fascinating. Because in a world where entertainment's built on algorithms and box office numbers, fan creations are pure. They don't exist for money. They exist because somebody, somewhere, refused to let go of the thing they loved. That's the heart of fandom. It's not just hype, it's responsibility. It's people saying, this story mattered to me, and I'm not ready to say goodbye yet. Sometimes that means remaking it, and sometimes it means continuing it. And sometimes it means reimagining it completely. You've probably seen it before. That random YouTube thumbnail with millions of views that looks suspiciously better than the last reboot trailer. You click it thinking, this can't be good. And then halfway through, you realize it's actually better. Because when people create from passion instead of obligation, you can feel it. And that's what I love about fan content. It reminds us that stories don't belong to studios. They belong to the people who care about them. Because once the story connects with someone, it stops being just a product, it becomes personal. And when something's personal, people will move mountains to keep it alive. That's why, over the years, you've seen fans step up when studios step back. When something they love gets canceled, mistreated, or misrepresented, they don't just complain, they rebuild it. They make fan films, animated series, re-edits, continuations. They make something that says this is what it should have been. And sometimes those projects are so good that they force the industry to pay attention. Sometimes they even change these stories' legacy entirely. Because love, real love for a story, it doesn't fade when the credits roll. It creates, it refuses to quit. And that's what this episode is about. It's about when fans stop waiting for someone else to fix the thing they love and just do it themselves. Not for fame, not for money, but for passion, connection, and community. This is when fans take over. If you listen to episode 1, you already know. I'm a bigger Sonic the Hedgehog fan than The Lion King, and that's saying something because The Lion King, it's iconic, but Sonic, for me, it's personal. It's Saturday mornings, it's GameCube afternoons, it's hours spent memorizing every single track, every single level in Sonic Heroes. He's fast, he's stylish, he's a little reckless. He's the perfect mascot for anyone who ever believed being different was the point. So when I first started coming across fan-made Sonic projects, it didn't surprise me that people were going all in because Sonic fans, they don't do it halfway. We go from, I love this game to I'm making my own version in about 3 days flat. And listen, being a Sonic fan, it's great, but being online as a Sonic fan, that can be an entirely different experience. Let's just say that Sonic Twitter, they're very passionate and emphasis on very. But before Paramount's official movie ever hit theaters, fans were already making their own. And I'll be real with you, the first live action Sonic fan film, it was fine. You know, the one that came out in 2013. It had heart, but it also had limitations. The visual effects were rough. The tone, it felt uneven, and the pacing, it did drag a bit. But even with all of that, I still respect it because before Hollywood ever took Sonic seriously, the fans did. They were the first to say, let's bring him to life. And that alone is worth celebrating. It's not that the movie was great. It really wasn't, but it mattered. It showed that people cared enough to try. And that's the kind of energy fan creations run on. Not perfection, but passion. Then came the Mega Man fan film, and it was made by the same company. Honestly, that one surprised me. It was sharper, cleaner, and more confident in its direction. It felt like the filmmakers had learned from the Sonic project and decided, all right, let's get serious. The lighting, costume design, visual effects, they were all improved. But what stood out the most was the tone. It was darker and more mature, but still full of heart. You could tell that they weren't chasing a trend. They were chasing the truth in the storytelling. That Mega Man film, it gave the same feeling that the old Mega Man X games had, that blend of hope and melancholy where technology and humanity constantly collide. It reminded me that even when budgets are low, creativity doesn't have to be. If the Sonic fan film was enthusiasm, Mega Man was evolution. It proved that fan creators can grow, refine their craft, and deliver something that feels professional even without the paycheck. But the project that I liked the most, it wasn't even live action at all. It's Sonic Rebound. If you read my reviews on my old Not a Movie Buff blog, then you already know how highly I think of this fan series. It's a fan adaptation of the IDW comics, but it doesn't stop there. It starts faithfully, following the early arc, the first one, but as it moves forward, it builds new stories, new tones, and new emotional stakes. It's everything a fan continuation should be. Respectful, yet unafraid to evolve. And what I love about it is how well it understands the spirit of Sonic's world. It's not just about speed or style, it's about resilience, friendship, heart. Sonic carries that confidence we all expect, but now it's deeper. It's the kind that comes from experience. Shadow, Knuckles, Blaze, they all bring balance to the story, each of them standing for a different kind of strength. Shadow's drive, Knuckles' loyalty, Blaze's calm in the chaos, and somehow Rebound gives them all equal weight. Nobody feels like background noise. They all matter. The visual style matches that same energy. It's bold, it's expressive, it's clean. The dialogue sounds like something straight out of an official script, but with just enough edge to feel fan-made in the best way. And the pacing? Tight, emotional, focused. It doesn't try to show off. It tells the story, and it tells it well. That's what makes projects like this special. They remind you that sometimes the people outside the industry understand the heart of a story better than the people controlling the license because they grew up with it, they lived it. And that brings me to what might be the most famous fan moment in Sonic history, the Paramount redesign. When the first trailer for the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie dropped in 2019, the reaction was instant and it was brutal. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Sonic looked wrong. He had tiny eyes, weird proportions, human teeth. It was like a fan made parody of a studio movie instead of the other way around. And fans let the studio know exactly how they felt. But what makes that story amazing isn't the backlash, it's what happened after. Instead of ignoring the fans or doubling down, the studio listened. They delayed the movie, reworked Sonic's entire model, and came back with something that actually looked and felt like Sonic. And it worked. That redesign didn't just save a movie, it redefined the relationship between creators and audiences. It proved that when fans speak out with passion and respect, and studios respond with humility, good things happen. That moment showed the best side of fandom. Not anger, not ego, but accountability and care. It was a rare win for both sides. Fans got the Sonic they grew up with, and the studio earned their trust back. And that's what makes this whole thing so powerful. Because whether it's a live action experiment, a refined Mega Man tribute, a passionate animated adaptation like Rebound, or a massive studio course correction, Sonic's legacy is proof that fans still matter, that their voices, their ideas, and their love for these characters can shape the future just as much as any executive decision. That's what makes Sonic's fandom so unique. It's not just about nostalgia, it's about responsibility. It's about caring enough to say we can do better and then actually showing how. That's what this whole episode is about. Fans keeping stories alive, sometimes by creating, sometimes by correcting, but always by caring. You can't talk about fan creations without mentioning Dragon Ball. It's one of those franchises that refuses to die, and not because of the studios, but because of the fans. The series has been part of so many people's lives for decades that it's practically a language at this point. You can show someone a silhouette of Goku charging up and they know exactly what's about to happen. It's more than nostalgia, it's cultural muscle memory. And that's exactly why Dragon Ball's fan projects hit differently. They're not just tributes, they're testaments to how much this story matters to people. We've all seen those YouTube thumbnails, a fiery aura, cracked ground, glowing eyes, and you can already tell someone put everything they had into that render. But every now and then, one of those fan projects breaks through. It stops being a good fan film and becomes something you actually recommend to people who have never watched a single episode. That's what happened with the Dragon Ball fan film centered around the androids. You might have seen it, the one that reimagines the post-apocalyptic world where Gohan is training Trunks, fighting off androids 17 and 18. It takes inspiration from the History of Trunks special, but pushes it further. Darker tone, tighter pacing, cleaner cinematography. You can tell it wasn't made to parody or imitate, it was made to honor. The first time I watched it, what stood out wasn't the effects, though for a fan project, they're impressive. But it was the weight. Every punch feels personal. Every transformation carries emotion instead of just spectacle. You can feel the exhaustion in Gohan's eyes, the quiet fear in Trunks' voice, and even the cruelty of 17 and 18. Not cartoonish, but human. It's Dragon Ball stripped down to what it's really about, fighting for hope when you have none left. And that's the thing. When fans take over, they're not limited by merchandising or network schedules. They can focus on what made people fall in love with it in the first place. That's why this short works. It remembers that Dragon Ball was never just about power levels. It was about perseverance. It was about watching ordinary people become extraordinary through sheer will. The camera work captures that intensity. You'll see sweat, dust, motion blur. It's shot like a war film, not a cartoon, which gives it this grounded realism that even the official movies rarely attempt. And the music? Minimal. No grand heroic themes, just enough tension to keep your heart rate up. It's the silence between hits that sells the emotion. What really impressed me, though, was how the film used restraint. It could have gone full CGI spectacle, but instead it focused on acting and atmosphere. That choice made it more impactful than any beam clash or screaming match could, because it respected the emotional stakes. That's how you know a fan made it. Someone who understands that the fights in Dragon Ball aren't just physical, they're spiritual. And this fan film captures that perfectly. It reminds you that what made Dragon Ball special wasn't the explosions, it was the heart behind the struggle. Every Kamehameha means something because of what it cost the person using it. And honestly, watching projects like this gives you the same feeling as Sonic Rebound. It's that reminder that fans aren't just recreating what they love, they're refining it. They're showing the emotional truth behind the spectacle. The Dragon Ball Android fan film does something official productions rarely do. It takes its time. It lets you sit in the pain, the loss, the silence, all before the next fight. And that's what gives it its edge. Because even though the effects are great and the action's top tier, what sticks with you is the emotion. That's why I respect it so much. Because it understands what Toriyama built and what the fans kept alive. It's not about rewriting the story, it's about relighting the fire. And that's the power of Dragon Ball's fandom. They don't wait for permission or budget. They just keep training, creatively, emotionally, spiritually, until they can pass that torch themselves. By now, one thing's pretty clear. Fans have power. And not just the kind that fills a comment section or starts a meme. Real, measurable power. The kind that changes release schedules, resurrects canceled projects, and sometimes rewrites how entire studios think about storytelling. It's crazy when you really stop to think about it, because 20 years ago, fans had almost zero influence. You could love a movie, you could hate it, but the most you could do was write about it on the message board and hope someone else agreed. Now, fans can shift the direction of billion-dollar franchises, and that's both inspiring and dangerous. Fan passion is a double-edged sword. At its best, it's community. People united by love for a story. At its worst, it becomes control, a demand for ownership over something that was never theirs to begin with. We've seen both sides play out. Take the Snyder Cut. For years, fans pushed for Zack Snyder's original vision of Justice League to be released. At first, most people laughed it off. They said, it didn't exist, it's just a myth. Warner Bros. Would never fund something like that. But the fans, they didn't let up. They organized, they campaigned, they donated to mental health charities under Snyder's banner, and eventually, it happened. In 2021, the Snyder Cut was released on HBO Max. And love it or hate it, that moment was historic. Because it wasn't the studio's idea, it was the audience's. They asked for something different, and the studio actually listened. That's the positive side of fan power. A collective voice leading to creation, not destruction. It's proof that fans can make change when their energy comes from passion, not outrage. But the Snyder Cut story also shows the darker side of that same energy. Because alongside the genuine supporters were people who weaponized the movement, harassing studio executives, threatening critics, attacking anyone who didn't share their opinion. It became a reminder that even the purest causes can lose their meaning when ego takes over. When people stop fighting for something and start fighting about it. That's the challenge with fan power. It's like electricity. It's incredible when harnessed, but destructive when unchecked. That brings me to another example, Spider-Man Lotus. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's worth mentioning because it's such a clear illustration of how things can go wrong. When Lotus was first announced, it had the potential to be something really special. It was pitched as a deeply emotional, fan-made Spider-Man story, a project that wasn't focused on CGI or explosions, but on grief, forgiveness, and humanity. On paper, that's exactly the kind of fan project we should be celebrating, one that puts heart over hype. But somewhere along the way, the message got lost. Controversy hit, stories came out, and suddenly the entire project was overshadowed by what was happening off-screen. The excitement turned into disappointment, and the fan base that once rallied behind it started questioning whether the story ever truly represented the character it claimed to honor. That's the heartbreaking part, because Lotus could have been a milestone for fan cinema. It showed how professional a fan film could look, the cinematography, the tone, the emotional ambition. but the integrity behind it didn't match the craft. And when that happens, you realize that skill alone isn't enough. Intent matters, heart matters. Fan creations, they can look incredible. But if the people behind them lose sight of what made the story special in the first place, the kindness, the empathy, the sense of hope, then the entire project collapses under its own weight. When passion turns into ego, you stop honoring the story and start trying to own it. You forget that fandom is supposed to be a celebration, not a competition. Because at the end of the day, fans and creators are supposed to be on the same team. The best fan projects, like the Sonic community's work or that Dragon Ball short, they remind us that passion can create art, but the toxic ones remind us that power without purpose destroys it. It's easy to forget that when we love something, it's okay to critique it, but not to crush it. It's okay to demand better, but not to dehumanize the people trying. There's a line between protecting a legacy and policing it. And the best fandoms know how to stay on the right side of that line. Because the truth is, no story belongs to just one person. The moment it connects with an audience, it belongs to everyone. But that doesn't mean everyone gets to rewrite it. What it means is that we all get to add to it in our own way, with respect for what came before. That's why I think of fan power as a privilege, not a right. When it's used with love, it creates things like the Snyder Cut, a fan-driven movement that made something real. When it's used carelessly, it turns into Lotus, a reminder that passion without humility loses its way. And that's what separates fandoms that build from those that burn. Because at the end of the day, being a fan doesn't mean owning a story, it means believing in it. And belief, when handled with care, is the strongest creative force there is. Every now and then, something happens that feels like the universe rewarding passion. All that creative energy fans have been pouring into their favorite world for years finally pays off in the best way possible. That's what happened with Across the Spider-Verse and one very talented kid named Preston Latanga. You've probably seen his name floating around, or at least you've seen his work. A few months before the movie released, Preston recreated the Across the Spider-Verse trailer entirely in Lego, shot for shot, sound for sound, frame for frame. At first, it looked like a fun little tribute, the kind of thing that gets a few thousand likes, gets shared around Reddit, and disappears into the endless scroll of the internet. But this one hit different. You could tell right away that it wasn't just a copy. It was crafted with real skill. Every lighting cue, every movement, every camera angle felt intentional. There was cinematic language in that stop motion. It wasn't a kid making a Lego video. It was a filmmaker who happens to be 14 years old. The video went viral overnight. Everyone was talking about how good it looked, the precision, the detail, the sheer love packed into every frame. But the story didn't end there. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the actual directors of Across the Spider-Verse, they saw the recreation and reached out to him directly. Not just with the retweet, not just with the pat on the back. They invited him to animate a sequence for the actual movie. And just like that, a 14-year-old fan became an official contributor to one of the biggest animated films of the decade. It's crazy to even say it out loud. A kid working from his home computer went from making fan art to making canon, literally animating a Lego Spider-Man scene in the real Across the Spider-Verse movie. When you watch that part of the movie now, that quick cut to Lego Spider-Man checking in with Miguel O'Hara, it feels different once you know the story behind it. It's not just a funny Easter egg or a clever crossover. It's a victory lap for creativity itself. What I love most about Preston's story is that it shows what happens when studios actually pay attention to the community. When they recognize that inspiration doesn't just flow one way anymore. Fans aren't just consuming, they're contributing. They're shaping the culture around these stories in real time. And when you treat that passion with respect, you don't just get engagement, you get collaboration. The coolest part? Preston wasn't hired because he was trending. He was hired because his work spoke for itself. He didn't need a campaign or a hashtag. He just created something so good that the people who made the real thing couldn't ignore it. And that right there, that's the dream for every fan creator. not to replace the professionals, but to earn a seat at the table by doing what they love. That's the kind of story that makes you believe in what's possible again. Because for all the talk about the internet being toxic or oversaturated, moments like this remind you that the good still breaks through, that talent can come from anywhere, that a kid with a laptop and a passion can make something that stands next to a studio masterpiece and belong there. It also says a lot about the filmmakers themselves. Lord and Miller didn't have to reach out. They could have easily ignored it or treated it like just another fan edit. But they saw the love behind it, the craftsmanship, and they understood something a lot of people in Hollywood still struggle with, that the best stories inspire more stories. And that's how the Spider-Verse team works anyways. Collaboration is built into its DNA. Every frame of those films feels like it's saying, look what's possible when artists from everywhere add their voice. So it's only fitting that they brought in a literal fan to join that conversation. That's what makes the Lego scene so special. It's not just a cameo, it's a symbol, a reminder that creativity doesn't belong to any one person or any one company. It belongs to anyone who's willing to care enough to make something. That's what's so powerful about fan culture right now. It's not just preserving stories, it's pushing them forward. The next generation of directors, animators, and writers, they're not waiting for permission. They're already creating in the same universes that inspired them. They're remixing, reimagining, and building, sometimes literally, on the foundations that meant the world to them. And Preston's story is proof of what happens when love and skill finally meet opportunity. He didn't break in by begging for a shot. He earned it by showing that passion, when paired with craftsmanship, is the qualification. That's the future I want to see more of. One where the line between fan and creator isn't a barrier, but a bridge. Because when fans become canon, everyone wins. When you look at all of this together, from Sonic and Dragon Ball to Spider-Verse, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Stories live longer when fans refuse to let them end. That's the heartbeat of fan creation. It's not about rebellion, it's about preservation. Fans build because they care, because something in those worlds speak to who they are. And what I find fascinating is how this entire culture has blurred the old lines. It used to be that stories came from above. Studios made them, audiences watched them. That was it. Now it's a conversation. Fans remix, expand, reinterpret, and sometimes even inspire the original creators to do better. It's collaboration on a scale no one could have predicted. But here's the key thing. Good fan creativity isn't about stealing ownership. It's about stewardship. It's about taking care of something that mattered to you, polishing it, and passing it forward for someone else to love too. The best creators, professional or not, they understand that. They don't gatekeep the stories they love, they nurture them. That's what I see in these projects. Not competition with the studios, but a reminder of why people fall in love with stories in the first place. Because when a fan draws, writes, animates, or shoots their version of something, what they're really saying is, this meant something to me, and I want to keep it alive. That's beautiful. It's powerful. Because the truth is, creativity doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to communities, to people, to the ones who stay up too late editing scenes on an old laptop or animating frame by frame just to see their favorite hero move again. Those are the moments that prove storytelling is still a living, breathing thing. And I think that's why fan creations matter more now than ever. Not because they're always better than the original, but because they remind us that the connection is still there. That there's still magic in caring deeply about something, enough to recreate it, reinterpret it, rebuild it from scratch. That's what keeps art human. That's what keeps it alive. So when I see fans stepping up like this, I don't just see imitation. I see gratitude. I see people saying thank you in the loudest, most creative way possible. And whether it's a sketch, a short film, a re-edit, or a Lego animation that ends up in an Oscar-winning movie, it all comes from the same place. Love. That's the bigger picture. Fan creations, they're not a threat to storytelling. They're proof of its strength. Because a story that can inspire others to keep building on it, to risk time, energy, and heart for it, that's not just entertainment. That's legacy. At the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. Stories that refuse to die. Whether it's a fan film, an edit, or an animation made in someone's bedroom, every one of these projects proves the same thing. When people care, art keeps breathing. And that's what I love most about this kind of creativity. It's not polished, it's not corporate, it's not perfect, but it's real. It's people saying, I love this world so much, I just want to live in it a little longer. That kind of passion is rare and it deserves respect. Because for every movie that gets forgotten, there's always a group of fans out there keeping the lights on, drawing, scripting, editing, remixing, reminding everyone why it mattered in the first place. They're not waiting for permission. They're proving that stories don't belong to a company. They belong to connection. And honestly, I'll always root for fan creators because they represent the best kind of obsession, the kind that builds instead of destroys, the kind that turns a what if into something real. So whether you're a filmmaker, an artist, or just someone who can't stop talking about the stories you love, keep creating, keep sharing, keep imagining new ways to make old worlds feel alive again. Because if this episode showed anything, it's that the next great storyteller might already be here, sitting somewhere with an idea, a laptop, and a little too much love for a character that changed their life. Next week, we're switching gears. We'll be talking about sequels that shouldn't work, but somehow do. Movies that had no business being good, but managed to surprise everyone anyway. It's going down next Thursday on Not a Movie Buff. But until then, remember, I'm not a movie buff, but I'll see you at the movies.